Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. It's a great city. I first have a confession to make. I'm not really a technologist. My organization is stuffed full of brainier people than me in that field, but I'll do my best. They're very busy, tied up in an internal series of events at the moment. I'll do my best, and I'm going to sort of focus a little bit on, why we need to be smarter than perhaps we have been in the past. Just a little bit of, how do you do this, John? Told you I wasn't a technologist.
You can press that.
Where's
that? Where's that?
The big green button in the middle. That's it.
There it is.
Yep, the big green button. I did start off life as a geologist many years ago. It's a long time since I bashed rocks in anger, but it was great last night to be in the museum at the function there, eating fish and chips and looking at the trilobites on display. So it's a long time ago since I've done my geology days. But who are we? Well, I think most of you know who Anglo is. It's got a portfolio of world-class assets, including copper. What's our purpose? Our purpose is, we've come up with this phrase, to reimagine mining. And I think this is a theme that has cropped up a few times today. We have to reimagine mining, as I think a few people have said. The footprint that we're making is getting bigger and bigger, and clearly there's something that's not sustainable there. Scale is what we've sort of used to keep costs down and things under control, but the rock's getting harder, the grades are falling, the tailings that we produce is getting larger in volume, and that's raising some concerns. But the important thing about reimagining mining is that we are connected to communities and to society, and it's for societal benefit that we want to improve. A strategy, well, innovation is at the center of one of Anglo's core themes. We want to be innovative. We want to be innovative alongside our customers and the rest of the industry. Sure, we'd like to reap the benefits of our own internal innovation, but one of the things that we're seeking to do, and I think it's common of the industry, is to look outside our industry. We've tended to be a bit inward-looking in the past, and it's time that we learned and took technologies from other industries. And as we enter an increasingly digitalized world with more complex systems, then that becomes increasingly important. It's not just the technologies that we apply, it's how we do them, how we interact, how we communicate, and so on. Where we operate, well, we operate around the world in a wide portfolio of assets. Probably fair to say that we're mostly sort of southern hemisphere oriented. Copper mines in Chile, assets in southern Africa, and also here in Australia. We don't have any producing assets in Australia. One day we'd like to. We do have some pretty interesting exploration activities in Australia, focused mostly on Queensland, and with some very encouraging results. And I have to talk to Dr. Hethersay at some stage and see what we can do in this part of the world. That's just a little bit of sort of performance metrics, EBITDA of 9 billion. So we're one of the larger companies. We've got some flexibility here to grow the business. It's a fundamentally different business. I think most of you would know that the years have not always been kind in this industry, and Mark Cutifani's now been at the helm for 4 years, and he's certainly transformed Anglo American, and I think that's now increasingly recognised, both in terms of raising production volumes, but streamlining our portfolio, focusing on the things that we think are going to create long-term value, and keeping our costs under control. And that's at the center of the sort of technology initiatives. How do we boost productivity? Our copper business, difficult to see the numbers there, but we produce from two large mines in Chile, Los Bronces and Collahuasi. We have interest in both those mines. A smaller mine at El Soldado, which is our sort of R&D hub. We use that as a bit of a hub for technology innovation, and then we also have a smelter called Chagres in Chile. We've also given the green light and are constructing what will be a considerable mine, very high quality in Peru, Quellaveco. which will produce somewhere around 300,000 tonnes a year. And it's fair to say that with all these larger assets here, we've got quite a lot of organic growth potential beyond the production that we're achieving today. Producing about 1 million tonnes a year of copper through that portfolio, mostly in the form of copper in concentrates, which we put into vessels and ship mostly to Asia, but globally. And this, I think, this is a fairly obvious diagram. It's been referenced by a number of the speakers before. As mining has taken place in the industry, we produce more and more waste. Those ratios between copper produced and the amount of waste that is generated and the amount of water that is used and the amount of energy that is used has expanded. And the precision trajectory is to try to reverse that pattern, produce less waste per unit of copper, less resources, more energy efficient. There's a lot of detail on this cartoon, and I think it sort of encapsulates many of the things that the technology teams in Anglo are working on. We'd like to get smarter in terms of how we mine. We want to use more autonomous systems. We want to get people out of harm's way. This is a key priority. It needs to be sustainable. I mean, when John referenced that renewable energy and how we harvest that at mine sites is increasingly important, and we saw the initiative that Oz Minerals has taken in that space. We're trying our bit as well. I mean, a good example of that is that the tailings dam at Los Bronces, we've decided to float solar panels on it to generate electricity. It's a waste of space, so float some panels on it and use those to help with our energy efficiency at the mine. It's not just about the specific technologies, but it's the data analytics platforms, and I think we're going to hear more about these systems. It's a systems approach. It's really looking at ways in which we can integrate right throughout the business. I mean, one of the initiatives we've launched in here is that we've got a thing called Smartbox, which is really trying to sort of capture the insights of all our employees. This is an ideas system where people can generate ideas. The clever people are actually out on the mine sites and in the plants, and this is starting to bear fruit. People are very keen to express opinions on how they think we can improve the business. And the essence of this is what we call future smart mining. It's really looking at how do we make the mine more concentrated, less waste, as John rightly said, more processing in situ, underground. The waterless mine we operate in a very dry climate. Our mine in North Chile is in a very dry area. Even our mine in the Andes, Los Bronces, water preservation is a key concern. And I mean, I think that's very familiar to people in this part of the world. The modern mine, obviously, this is sort of embracing technology, systems, controls, and so on. So it's the intelligent mine. We're getting better insights into how we operate, troubleshooting earlier when something doesn't quite work out, and obviously the connection to communities and our license to operate is crucial. Our communities where we're working need to be thriving and take the benefit of what we're doing, and obviously the environmental footprint has to be improving all the time. There's a PDF which you'll be able to get off the website later after the conference, and that's got a lot of slides in the back which actually go down into a lot more of the nuts and bolts of what Anglo is doing in the technology space. But I thought I'd just give you a bit of a perspective on why we need to do this. I mean, you probably recognize the ugly gentleman on the photo there, but anyone who believes there's no more expansion left in the uses of copper, I think is really missing a very important point. We've used copper for thousands of years, and why stop now? It's a material which is hugely important to helping improve the environment, mitigate climate change, but also to improve people's living standards. In other words, if we don't grow the use of copper, then people are not going to get wealthier. The environment is going to deteriorate further. So the two are absolutely inextricably linked to each other. So more copper means more improvement on the environment and better living standards. Good examples of that would be the revolution, as I call it, in air conditioning. Most of the world's population lives in the tropics. There's, 7 billion people on the planet. 2 of those are in what we call a middle class bracket. The other side of that coin is, isn't it remarkable that 5 billion are not? And obviously one of the sort of revolutions associated with cooling and heating is to improve the quality of people's lives in those regions. And this is a massive source of demand. Obviously we've got new sources of demand as well, as we've heard today, with new energy vehicles and so on. But right across the board, copper is expanding its density in existing uses. Yes, there's some substitution sort of pressures potentially there, but I think it's migrated to the uses to which the properties are best suited. I really like this chart because when I look at forecasts of copper demand, this is going back to 1900. It's refined copper use, so it's the first use level, which is why you get sort of shifts in the geographies. China obviously has become the manufacturing and fabrication center for copper. Not all that copper, as Eric said, is used ultimately in China. Something like a fifth of it is put into goods and products, which are then exported. But most important line there is the top one, which has been growing pretty much over that 100 years at not far off 3% per annum. Yes, there's been periods of time when there's been recessionary breaks, but that pattern is fairly clearly an exponential growth curve and growing units off a bigger base. Just, if the world grew consumption at 3% per annum, which is a little bit larger than Eric's number, but that's the equivalent of needing something like 20 new Collahuasi mines between now and 2030. And I think that's the challenge that the industry faces. Is there going to be sufficient timely supply that will meet those needs? This is really the point I was making earlier, that the GDP per capita for many parts of the world is quite low. And that means that the amount of kilos of copper per person in those regions is also very low. I mean, the world average use of copper is about 3 kilos per person on the planet. That's the average, but in places like Japan and US, it's sort of 6, 7, 8 kilos per person. In India, it's 0.2 kilos per person. So supply has got to keep up with demand, or society loses out. And I like this report from Paul Gate at Bernstein. It's a very good study, and his view on this is that for every ton of copper mined and embedded in the global economy, carbon dioxide emissions can be reduced between 150 and 1,000 tons per year. So I like the way he describes this, that the move from a high CO2 emitting economy to a more sustainable one is in many ways simply the shift from a carbon economy to a copper economy. I know we've seen this chart before. There's a supply gap coming. Obviously, in the end, supply and demand equal each other, but there's consequences if we don't fill that gap sooner rather than later. 2030 is not very far away. Well, I've got 9 million tons there. I think Eric had 8, but it's it's still a big number. And then finally, obviously the pressure here is that grades have fallen and they're now closer to those of reserves. I'm not pretending that the world is going to definitively run out of copper, but it's having to work harder to extract that copper from the rock. And this is why Anglo American, others are looking at new technologies, coarse particle separation, looking at ways in which we can release the elements, the valuable elements from the rock without using water and without using as much energy. And this is really sort of defining a problem that we have, and why technology and innovation and stepping up in that space as an industry and as organisations is absolutely vital. Thank you.